I grew up with Marcus, and we were tight since we were kids. When they framed me, he straight up denied me getting a lawyer, just thought I was too wild and blamed me for everything. Later on, I got roughed up and changed in that place, going through nonstop agony. Learned that love ain't everything. Still, he bawled his lungs out, pleading with me not to bail. When I was finally out, I was still rocking the school uniform from 5 years back. No one showed up to grab me, so I had to trek back solo, step by step. Honestly, I wasn't sure if heading back was the move. They took me into Marcus's crib when I was 5. Everyone said my folks couldn't handle their business flopping and ended up drowning themselves. If not for his parents' kindness, I would have just been another regular person. Back then, I didn't buy it and kept bugging Marcus for stuff, trying to grab that so-called sense of security. But now, the once flashy young lady, even the $20 in my pocket, were all handouts from others. I took a deep breath. I walked into a corner store to grab a loaf of bread. The old me would never settle for that, even if the fridge had leftovers overnight. I wouldn't touch it. That's why Marcus's mom even set up a special cafeteria for me at school. But now, staring at the bread bag the cashier was about to scan, I couldn't help but grin bitterly. We just took all the cash and there was no change in bills. "Can you pay with your phone?" He glanced at my money, looking kinda awkward, but I was clueless. "Pay with my phone?" I used to have one, but I always paid cash or with my card. Can people even pay with phones now? I felt awkward and didn't know how to explain. No phone, no clue on scanning codes. My pride, deeply ingrained, made my face burn, and I stood there, frozen. The clerk stared at me, getting impatient. "Are you gonna pay or nah?" I hesitated, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't have a phone." I stalled, my voice almost inaudible. "I don't have a phone." It was like a mosquito buzzing. I could almost hear whispers from the folks behind me in line. Their glares felt like sharp arrows hitting my back, making it tough to move. My hands started sweating. Couldn't help but flash back to 5 years ago. At the start, I still hoped Marcus would come to my rescue. No matter what, at least for the sake of Marcus's family, he should swing by. But in the end, those two women, with their lawyer, dragged my name through the mud. No security cams, and their stories matched perfectly. No way to overturn the case, and Marcus bailed on me. Our family couldn't get involved. "Just take the verdict," they said. Plus, if I didn't do anything wrong, how could anyone accuse me? Those two lines cut me off from Marcus's family completely. The childhood buddy I thought I had was just a joke. Now, it was time to wake up from that joke. The clerk was still staring at me, and I quickly waved my hand. "Sorry, I'll pass." He rolled his eyes, but I didn't dare argue. He was right. I was a mess, thinking that I had such a close bond with Marcus that I ended up in a spot where I had to learn everything from scratch. I walked dazedly down the street. My shoes were killing me, and I was starving. In the 5 years I was locked up, I never had a decent meal once. Now my stomach was burning, and I couldn't even feel the hunger pangs telling me when to eat anymore. I don't know how long I walked when a car pulled up in front of me. Someone got out, someone I didn't recognize. Instinctively turned to run. A voice came from the car, a voice that sent chills down my spine. The voice that had become my nightmare. "Mia, hop in." I turned and looked. The window was rolled down. That handsome face appeared, his messy bangs combed back, carrying the air of a successful guy. Always been perfect. And still was. Maybe these 5 years he lived freely, cruising a smooth path, paved by Marcus's family, Miss Mia. His assistant opened the door for me and formally said, "Please." If this had been the old Mia, seeing Marcus himself come to pick me up, I would have been over the moon. But now, I just took 2 steps back, cautiously and respectfully saying, "Thanks, I can head back on my own." "Get in the car." Marcus frowned. "Don't make me say it again." I shivered, like recalling something, and, on reflex, stepped forward and got in. I sat silently in the car. The interior was eerily quiet. Before, I would have made sure to chat with Marcus, telling him everything I'd been up to, everything I'd been through. But now, he just rubbed his temples, looking annoyed. "Mia, can you give me some peace and quiet?" "Mia, can you give me some peace and quiet?" So now, I let him have peace and quiet, and that was all left between us. Silence. He looked at me with a mixed expression, like he wanted to say something. In the end, he just mumbled, "Seems like you're doing all right." My body stiffened, and I couldn't help but glance at him. So, this is how he saw the 5 years I suffered, as me doing fine? Was that what he thought? Was living hungry and sleeping poorly, getting abused by roommates, considered doing well in his eyes? I even started to doubt if he had a hand in all this, but I didn't dare ask. What would knowing change? I had nothing now. How could I make him pay? After these 5 years, I realized how powerless I was. With just one word from him, couldn't even fight back. And to Marcus, I was just a little cat, a little dog. Even if I had died in prison, maybe someone else would have taken my body. To him, putting in even a little effort for me was a waste of time. I swallowed the bitterness in my mouth and tried to force a normal smile. Yeah, life's been good. Marcus wasn't happy with my answer, but didn't say anything more. Nothing left to say between us. The car sped down the road, heading toward Marcus's place. The seat was insanely comfy, a softness I hadn't felt in forever. I sat carefully, but still couldn't shake off the long-forgotten drowsiness. To keep Marcus from taking advantage, I secretly dug my nails into my flesh, and a faint bloodstain appeared, barely keeping me awake. Luckily, I had long gotten used to such self-inflicted pain, so it didn't hurt much, but my head throbbed enough to keep me alert. Like a tight string, ready to handle any sudden situation. "Why don't you just go home?" Marcus, now the boss, seemed to be talking more. I felt a bit antsy, but kept my face calm. "I don't have enough taxi money." Marcus frowned and looked at me. "You can't just roam the streets like this." "What if the media catches you?" He paused, his tone softened a bit. "Change your clothes and shoes when we get back. Don't you feel embarrassed?" I looked down at my outfit, but this was the same getup I had when I got into trouble 5 years ago. Isn't it fitting I come back in the same clothes now? Inside, didn't need to change a thing. I tugged at the hem, trying to make it look a bit more presentable, but it was all for nothing. Maybe the yellowed fabric made me look like a bum. Wanted to snap back like before, but then remembered Marcus hadn't come to see me once, so he wouldn't get it. I fell silent again and nodded. Marcus's irritation grew, the air around him thick with pressure. Weird. I was the one who suffered. Why was he pissed? My silence lasted all the way to Marcus's home. The car pulled in, and I was greeted by the grand entrance and garden. As I was about to step out, Marcus suddenly grabbed my wrist. I froze, cold sweat pouring down. Like I'd done this a million times before. Instinctively pushed him away and curled into the corner of the car, hugging my head with both hands to protect myself. Like a little ball, shielding myself. "Sorry." I apologized, confused and out of it. The world started to spin, and the subconscious memories in my mind grew stronger. Couldn't tell if it was now or in the past. All I remembered was having to beg for mercy. As long as I cried and pleaded, as humbly as possible, their punches and slaps would lessen, might even get a bit more food. I was like a madwoman, just wanted everything to end quickly. But the familiar pain didn't come, so I cautiously peeked out with one eye. Marcus's expression was off. The driver and the assistant also sensed something was wrong and turned their heads. Then came Marcus's furious outburst. "What are you looking at? Get out of here!" My brain instantly took the cue, and I immediately tried to move. "Okay, I'll go right now, Mia." In the next moment, Marcus forcefully grabbed me. "Mia!" His strength was immense, and my wrist quickly turned red. With restrained anger, he gritted his teeth. "What's wrong with you?" I met Marcus's gaze and froze. My memory began to fragment, and even the scenery quickly faded away. All I could see was him. "Marcus, I'm scared. The people here are beating me." I threw myself into his arms, acting like before, trying to be cute. "Please, take me away. I promise I'll stay far away from you in the future. I won't follow you again." "Marcus," I whispered, my voice breaking in sobs. Marcus slowly placed his hand on my head, his voice tender and soft. "It's okay. You've come back." The sensation on my head was so real, it seemed to calm all my fears. But the next moment, those memories surged back like a tide. In them, there was another person, someone who used to stroke my hair before she abused me. She liked to smile, to inflict pain on me with gentle words. You like Marcus, but you should look at yourself. Do you think you're good enough for him? She messed up my hair with scissors. She'd smash bowls and threaten me with the broken pieces against my face. In that extreme fear, I could still remember the way she looked at me. It was malicious, almost delightfully so. She said I wasn't worthy of Marcus. She said in everyone's eyes, I was just a clingy leech to Marcus. As I counted down the days for Marcus to come, she'd constantly warn me with words and actions. Eventually, I stopped wanting Marcus. In the end, I had forgotten what it felt like to love Marcus. It was like a tangled mess, and I struggled to break free. When I saw the tear stains on his suit, I panicked and reached out to wipe them away. I'm sorry. I'll clean it up right away. Please don't hit me. I beg you, don't hit me. I won't like my brother anymore. At that point, I froze. I won't like my brother anymore. At that point, I froze, as if trapped in some strange loop. No, wait, I mean Marcus. I won't call him brother anymore. He's Marcus, someone I could never reach. The sharp sounds of shouting and laughing from those days echoed in my ears. Like restless ghosts, seemed like I could hear them wherever I went. Like restless ghosts, seemed like I could hear them wherever I went. The emotional turmoil was too much, and I passed out. When I woke up again, I was in a familiar room. I immediately sat up, only to realize the room was empty. Outside, I could faintly hear the sound of fury coming from Marcus's study. He was on the phone, speaking loudly. What kind of life has she been living in prison? I didn't know what the other person had answered, but Marcus's expression changed, as if he'd been choked. Then he tightly gripped the pen. His joints were white, veins bulging. I told you not to care, but that doesn't mean people can bully her. If this happens again, you can forget about being a lawyer. I quietly left, saying nothing. He could have helped me, but he did nothing. He was cool with sending me inside, and he was also cool with living his life outside. I became more and more sure, to Marcus, I really didn't matter. After I got back to my room, the nanny, Rosa, came in with a bowl, her expression not too friendly. She never liked me being around Marcus, and now, seeing me in such a fallen state, she straightened her back even more. She placed the porridge beside me with a crisp sound. This is the porridge young master asked me to make. She crossed her arms. Thinking you're some kind of lady now? What are you now? I didn't answer, just quietly staring at the bowl of porridge. In the past, no matter what happened to me, Marcus would pretend not to see it. Even when I was sick with a high fever, he never once gave me his attention. But now, even though it was porridge made by him, I didn't feel happy at all. I even felt a bit nauseous. Looking for an excuse, I said to Rosa, "Rosa, can I have some water?" Maybe my attempt to please her was too obvious. Rosa couldn't help but sneer, "Oh, now you're understanding your place?" I nodded. She froze for a moment, then couldn't say anything. It was true. I never admitted that I wasn't meant for Marcus, that I would eventually marry into his family. Now, I was so obedient it caught Rosa off guard. She coldly said, "All right, don't act like you're some virtuous lady. Marcus is stubborn. If he says he doesn't like someone, he definitely won't like them." I didn't question her, just nodded. Rosa seemed like she wanted to say more, but Marcus walked in. "Rosa?" His expression was not good, and I wasn't sure how much of our conversation he had overheard. Rosa's face changed immediately and quickly took the bowl away. Well, that saved me the trouble of finding an excuse not to eat the porridge. After Rosa left, the room became quiet again. He stood at the foot of the bed, quietly watching me. Now, I didn't have any feelings for him, so I didn't blush or feel shy when he looked at me like before. I looked back at him. "Why didn't you fight back what she said about you?" He sat by my bed, and I instinctively scooted back. Marcus noticed, and his expression kept changing, but he held himself back and asked, "Have you really grown to despise me after 5 years?" I shook my head. No. 2 dry words. Marcus's anger flared up, and he stood up abruptly. At that moment, a stylish woman walked in, with brown wavy hair, a delicate suit, and high heels clicking softly on the floor. I knew her. She was Marcus's deskmate from high school. Her name was Elena. Looking at her outfit now, she was either loaded or well off. Didn't look like the girl who used to borrow money from me. Elena glanced at us and smiled. What's going on here? Marcus immediately softened his tone. What are you doing here? She pulled out a document from her bag. Of course, I'm here to get you to sign something, big shot. Elena moved gracefully and naturally linked her arm with Marcus's. He didn't pull away, but introduced her to me. She's my assistant now. I forced a smile. Honestly, the last person I wanted to see right now was Elena. Elena seemed very familiar with this home. Like now, she could even stay in the room I once desperately wanted to occupy. It was just one wall away from Marcus's. Elena leaned against the wall, winking at me. Mia, Marcus and I didn't expect you to come out so soon, so the room's not ready yet. Her voice was crisp and lively, just like the girl I knew 5 years ago. But Marcus is moving out soon, and I'll be moving my stuff in with him. Marcus stood silently beside her, watching my reaction. But how could I still have the same hostility toward the women around him like I did 5 years ago? I just smiled. Congrats. Elena paused, then said sweetly, Thank you. It seemed she had truly achieved her dream. She found a good man and was going to become a rich guy's housewife. Unlike me, who had wasted so much time without a degree or a job. I didn't even have $100 to my name. She shone brightly, while I was like a flower crushed and broken in the mud. Anyone could step on me. This was the payback for being with a man, and the price of my growth. I didn't go downstairs for dinner, just quietly stayed in my room. Marcus thought I was trying to get his attention again. The sound of his leather shoes clicking on the floor echoed. Mia, what are you up to this time? I looked up at him. The light from the crystal chandelier was blinding, and his face was a shadow in the glow. Staring at him for too long made my eyes burn with a strange heat. There was a kind of indescribable pain. I lowered my gaze and softly said, I don't want to eat. It wasn't that I didn't want to eat. On the contrary, I was really hungry. But I had been starving for so long. Couldn't eat much at once, so I could only ease the hunger with some thin porridge. Rosa had cooked all kinds of rich dishes, but there was nothing I could eat. Marcus could misunderstand if he wanted to. I'm sorry. I clenched my fists, trying to wipe away the tremble in my heart. Mia, you're free now. No one will ever beat you again because you refused them. Never again. I forced my tears back. Remembered that Marcus used to hate it when I acted weak in front of him. He'd say it was all an act and looked terrible. And the person I was supposedly imitating was Elena. Actually, before high school, Marcus and I didn't have such a bad relationship. He would wait for me to go to school and take me on trips. Sometimes when he was in the mood, he'd take me out for fun. Marcus's parents were always busy, barely spending a day at home. So Marcus took on the role of an older brother. That was until he met Elena. Her family wasn't wealthy, but she was well off enough to attend a private school. On the first day of school, she became Marcus's desk mate. She didn't care about the power of Marcus's family. Whenever Marcus didn't do his homework, Elena would glare at him fiercely. Then she'd follow him every day until he finished his homework. After that, Marcus became more and more reluctant to do his homework. Every time he came home, he'd just stare at his books, then smile lightly. I felt uneasy and immediately went to find Elena. She just looked at me with disdain. Mia, do you really think childhood friends can beat someone who shows up halfway? I didn't understand what she meant. Her expression pissed me off, and I started to target her, sometimes on purpose. After she cried and left, angered by something I said, Marcus lost it. He kicked my desk in front of the whole class. Everything spilled out all at once. Mia, stop acting like an animal. He actually said that to me. He dared to say that. I was nearly out of my mind with anger. In a fit of rage, I rushed to Elena's house. I arrived just as her family went bankrupt, and she was kneeling on the ground, looking pitiful. I didn't want to ask too many questions, just handed her a card. It was my allowance from Marcus's family. Didn't know how much her family owed, but it was enough to help in an emergency. Thought she was being difficult because of pride, not realizing that I was wrong. The card I gave her was thrown back at me by Marcus. He was furious. What exactly did you do to Elena? Marcus slapped me. Her family's bankruptcy was your doing, wasn't it? Is your inheritance just for you to throw your weight around? He didn't even give me a chance to explain. He instinctively stamped his judgment on me, assuming I was behind the bankruptcy of her family's business, and then used the money to make Elena leave. We'd known each other for years, yet it all crumbled because of someone else's words. I was young and impulsive back then. I sneered and said, "Yeah, that's right. It was me." I still remember how reckless I was in my words. Who told her to like you? Who told her to try and steal my person? Honestly, I regretted saying that. Could think it, but shouldn't have said it. Marcus's pride wouldn't let me treat him like he was my property. Marcus's pride wouldn't let me treat him like he was my property. Sure enough, he sneered. The next day, he was in a relationship. His girlfriend was Elena. After they started dating, I withdrew into myself at school, only focused on studying, hoping to leave this place as soon as possible. Luckily, several schools abroad were happy with my grades and achievements over the years. As long as I graduated, they'd accept me immediately. But then, 2 months later, during the most crucial time of senior year, someone died. She was Elena's best friend. That day, I was once again on the top floor of the classroom, studying English while I was memorizing, heard dragging sounds outside. Instinctively, I followed. 2 people were dragging a girl and half pushing her to the rooftop. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. I turned around to find a teacher, but someone seemed to trip me, and I hit my head against the wall and passed out. Before losing consciousness, I saw the girl like a kite with a broken string. She fell rapidly to the ground. Fear filled her eyes. Later, they insisted they drag the girl to the rooftop and left. With Elena's testimony, I became the target. Everyone thought I attacked Elena's best friend out of spite, wanting to make Elena suffer. Such reasoning was almost laughable, but no one stood up for me. Not even Marcus, after what happened, did I ever see him again. But now, I had grown quiet, and Marcus, on the other hand, was quick to anger. He rubbed his head in frustration. "Mia, what do you want?" Marcus squatted down. "You used to always speak your mind. What's going on now?" His eyes met mine, filled with deep confusion. Yes, in front of me, he was always powerless. Because he didn't want to think too much? I was always able to handle my emotions and face him. It was as if he didn't need to think about me at all. Marcus sighed and placed his hand over mine. "I know you've been wronged, but Mia, who hasn't? When I didn't help you, do you think my parents didn't get angry at me?" He smiled bitterly. "All these years, your room has been off limits. Sometimes, even if I wanted to go in, I had to get their approval first." I remained indifferent, just listening. Marcus's mouth moved, like he had more to say. But before he could, the door opened. Elena peeked her head in. "Boss, the meeting's about to start." Marcus frowned. "Cancel it." Elena stuck out her tongue. "We can cancel, but what about the acquisition? Everyone's worked so hard." "Don't you want to listen?" Her words were sharp, very much like Elena. I glanced up at her. She looked back at me confidently, but with a hint of mockery in her eyes. "Mia, wait for me." Marcus tightly pressed my fingers, his voice dropping. "When I get back, I have something to talk to you about." I watched them leave. Just like before, as long as Elena was around, his attention wouldn't be on me for long. "But Marcus, what makes you think I'd still wait for you?" I tied the bedsheet to the balcony and quietly slipped away. As a child, I never imagined this trick would become my lifeline. All the old stuff was still there, so I just grabbed what I needed and left. Leaving Marcus's house, I glanced at the room with the light still on. Marcus hadn't changed, and he probably wouldn't notice I was gone for a while, didn't care whether the light in that room was on or off. I quickly slipped on my house slippers and ran as fast as I could. The old wound still throbbed faintly, but I didn't care. To my surprise, not 10 minutes later, I was spotted. "Mia?" He got out of the car, wearing nothing but a casual t-shirt. His messy bangs covered his forehead, giving him a boyish charm. I resigned myself and said, "Long time no see, Leo." He was my deskmate in middle school, but he transferred abroad in the second year. But now wasn't the time to catch up. I grabbed him and asked, "Can you take me to the bus station?" He didn't get it, but still agreed. Just like in middle school, not understanding my behavior, but still following me like a little sidekick. In the car, Leo kept asking me why I was heading to the station so late. I had no choice but to mumble a few vague replies. He turned the steering wheel with a cold expression and changed direction. "What are you doing?" Leo looked at the road. "We're going to the hospital first." When we got to the hospital, he didn't care about the stares from others and lifted me up horizontally in his arms. Then a doctor came out from inside. I was forced to undergo several tests, and when the report came back, I was still feeling dazed. Except for Leo. He stared at the papers intensely, his hands trembling. "That bastard really took care of you like this?" Leo's voice was filled with so much pain that I couldn't help but look up at him. "It's fine. I'm better now, aren't I?" Leo sat down at the edge of the bed and asked, "So what do you think of Marcus now?" His sudden question caught me off guard, but I still shook my head. "What else is there to think? I never want to see him again, even if he dies." Leo nodded. "All right," I blinked. Just then, the door to the ward opened, and Marcus walked in with a stern face. Elena was behind him, blinking innocently. I turned my head away, for the first time wishing to rely on someone, casting a pleading glance at Leo. Leo smiled at me reassuringly. "The patient needs to rest. Let's talk outside." He pulled Marcus out with great force. Elena didn't follow, her eyes lowered, with sharp eyeliner drawn. "You really are lucky now you've got Leo on your side." I didn't get what she meant, nor did I want to deal with her. I simply turned my face away and looked out the window at the night view. "Isn't it nice inside? You're treated like royalty every day. Do those women treat you well? They took a large sum of money from me." I turned back in fury, glaring at her. Elena seemed pleased, her long nails scratching my face. "Do you know I've been waiting 5 years to see you like this? I visited those women every day, listening to them tell me about your miserable state." "You have no idea how happy I was." She leaned in closer and whispered, "Forgot to tell you. A lot of what happened was something I taught them to do. As long as it's not discovered, you can endure even more." Elena's face twisted with malicious glee, and without a doubt, if we weren't in a hospital, she would have been happy to tear my face apart and rip me to shreds. But right now, I wanted her to experience the same pain I once did. But how could I do that? She had money, status, and was Marcus's beloved girlfriend. And I had nothing. Only my life. A string inside my mind seemed to snap. Why? Why was this happening? Why could the abusers roam free while I had to endure all this pain? Could I never escape? Then let's die together. It felt like I had to endure all this pain. Could I never escape? Then let's die together. It felt like I had received some sort of signal. I ripped the foreneedle out of my arm and gripped Elena's neck with both hands. She seemed not to realize I could be this crazy and immediately started waving her hands to pull me off. I grabbed her by the hair, dragging her like a dead body. I opened the window, and a cold wind rushed toward my face. That was my freedom. We were still rescued in time. Marcus was the first to notice something was wrong. By the time he rushed in, I was expressionless, almost throwing Elena out the window. Half of her body was already hanging outside. She looked just like that girl, with the same terrified expression, but Elena was already hanging outside. She looked just like that girl, with the same terrified expression, but Elena was even more scared. Marcus grabbed Elena's hand while forcefully pushing me away. "Mia, you've really lost it." I was thrown to the ground, staring up at Marcus with blank eyes as he stood towering over me. "5 years ago, you caused harm to someone, and now you're doing it again?" His eyes were filled with disappointment. Marcus hadn't changed. Whenever something went wrong, he was always against me. So this was how I appeared in his eyes, poisonous and malicious. 5 years ago, he didn't want to hire a lawyer for me because he also believed the rumors. In his mind, I was someone capable of murder. "Apologize to Elena." He grabbed my wrist with great force. Partly as a threat, he said, "Otherwise, you'll never come back." Then, as if he thought of something, his gaze softened, and he coaxed me. "If you apologize, I won't make a big deal out of it. Make a big deal of it if you want." Leo pulled me away, the scent of wet and perfume entering my nose, giving me a sense of calm. 5 years ago, I couldn't protect her. This time, let's see who dares to touch her. His voice was firm and strong. Marcus's lips trembled slightly, exposing his panic. "What are you sticking your nose into my family matters?" Leo laughed. "As long as Mia is willing, this can also be my business." Elena's face turned pale. She looked at Marcus, and as expected, he grew furious. But Leo's family held too much power, and Marcus often had to rely on their status. Leo's dry, large hand held mine tightly, giving me some courage. I'm not Marcus's family. I don't have any blood relation to them. I met Marcus's disbelieving gaze. Marcus, listen up. From now on, you have no right to interfere in my affairs. The ridiculous incident at the hospital ended. After being discharged, I moved into the neighborhood Leo arranged for me. I originally wanted to refuse, but Leo said Marcus had been tailing me lately, and if I really left, he'd definitely drag me back. At least for my safety, he hoped I wouldn't refuse. I had no choice but to agree. During this time, Leo seemed very busy. I didn't want to bug him, but when he was exhausted and lying on the sofa, I'd cover him with a blanket or heat up a cup of milk when he'd been working too long. Leo was very observant and noticed that I didn't like being alone. He'd come early and leave late every day. He knew how to keep the right distance in our relationship, neither too close nor too distant. Gradually, I started sharing small things with him again. We returned to the closeness we had in middle school. Half a year passed, and I slowly started to accept the outside world again. I couldn't live under Leo's wing forever. Just when I thought I had moved on, I got out of the taxi, and Marcus was standing right in front of me. He had lost a lot of weight. His eyes were sunken, and he smelled strongly of cigarettes. Didn't expect him to look this worn down, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. I know everything that happened in the last 5 years. I was confused, just staring at him. I've fired Elena, and I've withdrawn all investments from her family's company. Mia, will you forgive me? I gave him a half smile. So, you're saying I should thank you for avenging me? Marcus quickly waved his hand, hesitant. Mia, will you move out from Leo's place and come back to me? I scoffed. But I haven't apologized to Elena yet. And come back to me? I scoffed. But I hadn't apologized to Elena yet. Marcus was filled with overwhelming grief. Do you really have to hurt me like this? You weren't like this before. I smiled. Exactly, Marcus. The past was the past. Do you really think you can just erase those 5 years by bowing your head? Elena tormented me so much, and you just fired her. She's still the rich young lady of her family. Besides, it was your fault for not standing up for me back then, which allowed Elena to take advantage. I said in a low voice, I only want to ask you one thing. When they suspected I had a motive, what were you thinking? He couldn't speak, because he also suspected me. He thought I had hurt Elena's friends out of love and possessiveness. In his eyes, I had already been branded as a killer. Elena was sentenced. The case that had once seemed closed made new progress. They found that someone else had been on the rooftop that day. In a corner, they found Elena's school ID card. It was spotted by a student when the school was doing a cleanup. Later, Elena, in panic, confessed everything. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for perjury. As for the 2 others, they were sentenced to life imprisonment. After I was imprisoned, one became a teacher at a private school, and the other inherited family wealth to do charity. Even after causing deaths, they still lived glamorous lives. But delayed justice wouldn't waver because of their family. 5 years later, the truth came to light. That school abroad sent me an invitation letter and also reissued my high school diploma. Before getting on the plane, I looked sincerely at Leo. Thank you. If it weren't for him, things wouldn't have gone this smoothly for me. He simply patted my head and said, Study well out there. I'll give you a big gift when the time comes. I wanted to say more, but my gaze fell on someone. He stood behind a pillar, staring at me intently. I didn't linger on him for too long and just turned to walk inside. My world was just beginning to unfold. Later, Marcus came to find me several times, each time standing silently at a distance. He didn't approach. Sometimes even the rain soaking him seemed to go unnoticed. But during the last time, he walked up to me, his fingers white from where they hung at his side. Marcus's gaze swept over my face before he finally spoke after a long pause. It's nice, better than being in that house. The bitterness lingered at the corners of his lips as he walked away heavily. I felt confused by his actions but was too tired to dig deeper. When I graduated, I received some information. The circumstances of my parents' deaths were redefined. It turned out that Marcus's family wanted to take over my dad's company, and after their acquisition attempt failed, they tampered with my parents' car, deliberately telling them on a rainy day that I had a fever of nearly 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In the midst of such harsh conditions and anxiety, they fell into the sea. As for Marcus's parents, they adopted me without a hint of remorse and became agents of my family's company. And because of the crimes committed, I was forced to relinquish my inheritance of the company. I learned all of this only after Marcus took over the company. He knew very well it was their fault. Yet even after everything that happened, he showed no regret. He always believed that no matter what happened, I would always be behind him. I bought a ticket to return home. Marcus's parents had already been apprehended and were set to face trial. As for Marcus, knowing of the crimes but failing to report them while attempting to hide the evidence, he was also imprisoned. Leo asked if I wanted to see him. I didn't answer, nor did I say I would go. If it weren't for Leo, I would still be mistaking a thief for my father. No matter how far Marcus's family fell, it wouldn't bring back my parents. On the first day back, I went to my parents' memorial. There were already flowers placed there, and the area had been cleaned up nicely. That person turned his face. I saw him clearly. The sunlight fell on him, bringing a bit of fractured warmth. "Mia, are you still taking on little followers?"